please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to our October 11th, 2022 Tiverton School Committee meeting. I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Sorry, anyone signed up for open? Okay. I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Dr. Larkin, may I ask that we pull the enrollment report for discussion?
Okay, is that a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to pull the enrollment report for discussion.
Okay, I'll second that. I'll ask for a roll call vote. Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes. Yes.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So other than item 6, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda.
Yep. So moved.
Second.
Okay, I'll ask for a roll call vote. Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes.
Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
I vote yes. Mrs. Farnworth?
Dr. Sanchioni, as you may remember, last month I asked to have the same report pulled because there was a fluctuation in the numbers on the downside. Looks like this month we've made a complete 180 turnaround there. Is there something with the September report, perhaps?
Sure. If you train your eye, if you're looking at the document, if you look at September and you go to the bottom line, you'll see ODP. And so we hadn't put those numbers in yet because it takes a while to track and get everyone's situation accurately recorded. And so now in October, you'll see the ODP numbers as the bottom line, and that 166 students is added into our total because they are our students and our responsibility.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
For those watching, can you tell what ODP is?
Out of district placement. Thank you. Good question.
So in September, our total enrollment was 1,609, and there was no out-of-district placements counted, but then in October we counted 166, so it went up to 1,779.
Yes.
And just, again, sort of in case someone's watching this in the next few centuries and wondering what those people were talking about way back then. Okay, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve item 6.
Make that motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
I vote yes. All right, next we are up to item, I'm going to ask to table item 7A for the time being. Our consultant is not able to be here.
So we're removing it entirely?
Tabling it.
Are we tabling or just?
Yeah, she's going to be about 15 minutes late.
Oh, okay. I'll make the motion to move item 7A down to further in the agenda for when the consultant is able to arrive.
Is there a second?
I'll second, as long as that's word, right? I was going to say switch 7A to 7C.
Well, we just don't know when she's going to arrive.
Right.
That's
Well,
the
for
problem.
now, at least it puts it at C instead of A.
I think Diane's wording is fine.
Okay. I'll second Diane's motion.
Okay. Ask for a vote. Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
I vote yes. Okay, so we are up to item 7B, request to use funds to purchase a van. Dr. Sanchioni, Mr.
Great.
Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And momentarily, I'm going to turn this over to our AD, Mr. Chuck Grant. So you know we've had some problems with transportation for our athletes. I think some of you have gotten calls specifically with our cross-country team this year. We were not able to provide transportation. There were several teams last year in the spring we were not able to provide transportation. And I can't even guarantee come winter and this coming spring that we'll be able to have busing again. We're at the mercy of our bus company, and they're at the mercy of being able to have drivers, have buses available, and things of that nature. So you may recall about a year ago we had come to you with an idea of purchasing a van, and we've been continuing to research that and so forth. And again, momentarily I'll let our AD, Chuck Grant, go through some of the rationale. But what I want to share with you is that through the hard work, diligence of our finance director, we were able to get that FEMA reimbursement that we were pursuing, and that is $90,000. So it's unencumbered funds. It's funds that we can use for anything that the school committee determines is where it could be. And hence, with that money available now, I think the wisest thing we can do with that is to go after this van. There's a lot of savings to be accrued for this. The van would actually probably pay for itself in a few years. But more importantly, it's going to provide consistency for our athletes that we know now that we have one form of transportation that many of our athletic teams can use to get to the games at a much cheaper cost. We also can use it during the day for field trips, for small field trips, for classes and things of that nature where, again, and Principal Craven could speak to this too, about some classes that go out on field trips. And again, anytime we take a trip, it's anywhere between $400 and $600. And with our own van, I mean, that cost is drastically reduced. So there's a lot of rationale to pursue this, but Mr. Grant has done some more research on this, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Chuck, and give the school committee some more information.
Thank you very much for having me here tonight. This is becoming a very popular trend in transportation, basically because of the COVID situations that have left driver shortages all over the place. This would allow our coaches to drive these vans. There's no special license required here. It also gives us the flexibility to choose who goes in the van. This wouldn't be a privilege. This would be a business decision each time. Whoever had the most expensive trip, barring their roster size and would fit, would be the team that would go. This also would take weekend trips where our cross-country team would go and take a big bus and go with 8 kids, and the cost can be very exorbitant when they're there all day waiting for the race to start, waiting for other people, the girls race, the boys race. Now you send the van and it doesn't cost you anything other than our payment per month. There's quite a bit of savings. The other thing is that it allows us to, right now, you look at our facilities, and I can't speak for other towns coming to us, but we can't start events at our place until well after 4:30 because teams just can't get here. If we have the ability to get there, then we can start events there earlier and we can get home sooner. So instead of kids getting home at 7:30, 8:30, they'd be getting home at 5:45, 6:30. I know that we have rides that are pretty long here because of where we're located, and commuting to schools that are comparable to size can be a bit of a trip here in Rhode Island. But that's also a big reason why we pay more for transportation. And this would allow us to save considerable amount of money, be flexible with who takes it, be home earlier, and ideally, going down the road, 2 would be the ideal thing because you can do so much more with 2 teams. But this would also take the pressure off the 4 o'clock buses that go out by being able to send one team out at 2:30. Now you're not asking for 3 buses at 4 o'clock where they can't get us a third one until 4:45. So, and I can't say enough about the bus company and how well they have worked with us and what they try to do to accommodate what we have going. But you can't send a bus if you don't have a driver. And this would just give us such an advantage of getting out of here on time and getting teams to games that just haven't had the capability of getting there unless they're driven by their parents.
So there's a lot of information on the document we put together for you. One of the things I would say to you, though, our intention would be to buy the van outright with the funds that we have, so we weren't accruing finance charges, and we feel like working with that dealership, we would get a much better price on the van from inception. So again, a lot fell in place to make this recommendation to you. And again, I feel like the van would serve a main purpose of supporting our student athletes, but also financially, I think it's a great savings for us. So with that said, any questions?
So I'm going to ask for a motion to approve in order to open up the discussion.
I'll make the motion to approve a 2023 Ford Transit 15-passenger van. And I'm looking again for the cost.
60,000 if we pay cash, 72,000 with financing.
Okay. What would you say was the cash price? Okay.
60,149.
$60,149.
Okay, motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, I'll open up the floor to questions from the committee.
Yes,
Mrs. Pava.
I have 2 questions. My first question is, who will it be that drives this van?
The coaches will drive the van. They don't need a special license.
So if it's a basketball game, it'll be basketball coaches. If it's field hockey.
Correct.
My other question is insurance.
Mhm.
I know maybe Amy is a guru insurance lady, but
Well, we have fleet insurance right now, so it would come under that umbrella. So it would be part of a blanket coverage for all of our vehicles, so the cost wouldn't be that exorbitant. So
it will cover all coaches. There will never be parents driving the
No,
van. That's
no,
a
it has to be an-
concern that I have.
Yeah, it has to be an employee of the district.
Okay. Okay, those were my two questions.
Okay, Mr. Dakotas?
Will this be able to be used for the middle school at all?
Class trips, sure, during the day. I mean, you bring up a good point, Mike, because if we're looking to expand sports back to what we had 5 or 6 years ago with middle school soccers, right now, we just can't do it unless parents agree to drive the teams
Right.
themselves. But by bringing this van in, it gives us that one more option on a day that we could get, because middle school usually just plays the one game a week.
Right.
We could make that work, because we would know what day would be empty, and we can put the games on that
Okay.
day. So it creates that kind of flexibility as well.
So, for instance, last year, my daughter did cross-country, basketball, and then it was first-year baseball, softball, which that part we agreed to pay for. But cross-country, they never took a bus once. This year, we haven't taken a bus. We're the only team that shows up by car. So Newport, Middletown, Portsmouth, Barrington, they're all getting a bus. Basketball last year, boys and girls, not once did we get a bus. We're the only ones. So my concern is that parents are driving, and they're driving kids. Some are driving other kids with permission. It just seems like an insurance risk, anything to happen. So, I mean, this is my personal opinion. This is a great idea. I just want to make sure that it can be used for the middle school. There's only a handful of teams, but having parents driving kids, I think, is a risk. And we keep taking the risk.
I would say to you that this van would be used at every opportunity when it's whatever teams are available. So if it's like, as Mr. Grant just said, we would try to schedule middle school on off dates from our varsity and JV so that the middle school could use it.
Okay.
The only thing that you have to remember is it's a 15-passenger van. You're not taking the cross-country team anywhere. It's, it's too large,
well,
so you have to.
That is.
You have to think about
The
that.
middle school cross-country team, correct. The high school
Yeah,
would fit on it, but
right.
middle school, you're
Okay.
absolutely right.
So maybe basketball, it could work depending on how many kids are on the team.
Yeah.
Usually you
So
get a
could
12-person
softball,
roster for
baseball.
basketball.
Okay.
Work for them.
And it holds 15 total with the driver.
Correct.
So if there's 16 kids on the team, that
Right,
won't
and then
work.
you've got to
Correct.
consider the coaches.
So
know.
15 including the coach, who they're driving, so you'd have a
And-
roster of 14, right?
Yeah, unless coaches would take their own or maybe if there are two coaches, maybe one would drive their own
Right.
car if necessary, and a coach would accompany the kids on the bus, because a
Right.
15-to-1 is fine.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Ms. Farnworth?
So I do support the idea, but I do have a number of questions that are more procedural. First of all, are we not required to put something like this out to bid?
The MPA list, we could take it off a bid list.
Okay. What is the vendor? I don't see any mention of a vendor here or any paperwork showing the quote.
Well, once, we're looking for your permission first, so we have a quote, that's all. But once we know we have permission for you to pursue this, we'll go out and then, facilitate several vendors, see what the best price we can get. But we wanted to give you an idea from one vendor we spoke to what a cost was.
Okay, so any quote, any vote tonight is not permission to buy, it is permission to pursue.
Depends on how the motion is.
Yeah, I mean, we'd like permission.
I would like to see the actual dealer quote, as opposed to, and I appreciate the memo, it is fairly comprehensive, but I want to see a dealer quote.
Perhaps then you would give us permission to buy at a certain amount and cap us then. We're giving you a quote that we have right now, $60,149, so maybe, if this is something you feel comfortable with, giving us $63,000. If it's above that, we'd come back to you.
I mean, I'm looking at this, you've got $60,149, clearly you have a bid.
We have a quote. We
A
spoke
quote from
to
a dealer.
From a dealer.
So why don't we have that dealer in front of us with the paperwork?
We're looking for your permission first, because we will now go out to other dealers and see what deal we can, for this presentation, we wanted to give you an amount that we felt solid with.
Okay, and can you help us understand a little bit what this FEMA reimbursement thing is? I'm not remembering this.
Sure. You may recall, the town had asked us to pursue FEMA reimbursement for all of our COVID expenses. And so we did. At one, we had conflicting information from multiple sources. We could qualify, we wouldn't qualify. Through Amy's diligence and hard work, we just submitted everything, and this is the outcome of that is we received a check for $90,000.
Okay. I did also have some of Mrs. Pavo's concerns over insurance and the drivers, but I think you answered those. Well, aside from my concerns over not having adequate documentation, I have no other questions.
So I have a couple. So the savings is about 11,700 a year. So we'll call it 12,000. So it would pay for itself, assuming those savings were solid in about 5 years, right?
Except those savings have the finance charge included in it now, and so we're recommending to you to purchase outright and eliminate this, the finance charge. So the savings would be a little higher, probably closer to 13,000.
I'm not sure I follow that part.
So the savings is, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Green, is based on the 72,000?
Correct.
Yeah, so we originally thought we might have to, before we knew we had the FEMA money, we were gonna ask you to purchase this and lease it.
Finance.
Lease to own. So the savings were based upon the 72,000, but we would recommend that we use the FEMA money, purchase the van outright, eliminate the finance charges, save almost $13,000. So that savings then would be a little bit higher on an annual basis.
So I'm going by the part at the bottom where it says bus costs are $25,875, and then the van costs.
Yeah, so the van
But
costs-
those are operational, those aren't the cost of the van. Those
no.
are gas and insurance and,
It had the $999 monthly fee in there.
oh, I see.
Yep, line 4.
It did?
Van payments would be $990 times 12 a year, so it would be $11,880 a year paying for the van if we were to finance it as opposed to paying outright for it. So the price would drop from $72,000 if we financed over a 6-year period down to $60,149.
So then it's just $1,000 in fuel and,
Some maintenance, the insurance, gas.
We'd be putting approximately 5,000 to 6,000 miles a year on it, so it wouldn't necessarily be overdriven, but certainly brakes would be a maintenance situation, oil changes and whatnot, although you wouldn't have to have too many oil changes. With 6,000 miles, would probably be 2 oil changes a year, but
but just for point of clarification then, so the $25,000, 875 of bus costs would be minus $2,000 or $3,000, we'll call it $3,000 for purposes of discussion. So the savings per year is $22,000.
if we went with the price, if we were able to buy it for the cash
If we
price,
bought it
we
outright.
would save that much more, correct? But this is based on if we were to finance it.
Dr. Larkin, I think it says it's 3 seasons of 20, for a total of 25,000, not per year.
So it'd be 25 trips fewer per
Oh, I see,
season, so
okay,
75 total
yeah.
trips, yeah.
All right, got it.
And that's based on the number of trips times the average price of $345 a bus trip.
75 trip, okay. Equals 75 trip. So you only see 25 trips per season? That seems not that many compared to the number of teams we have.
Well, you figure it depends on what the schedule is and who's going where, so we don't always have a game every day, especially in the winter. We're only going to have 2 games a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. So we would, although middle school basketball, and we would have games for there, which would work out well because they play on off days. So these numbers are fairly conservative in terms of the number of trips. But it isn't realistic that we just don't have games every day. I'd love to
Right.
say that we would have a trip every day with the van, but with rain and everything else, there's another situation where you start to stockpile trips on the same day. Not so much in the winter, of course, but in the spring and in the fall.
But I guess I would just hope that we'd be using it more than 25 days a year. That's not that much, it seems like.
It doesn't seem like it. Seasons are 9 weeks long.
Right.
So you've got 45 days of trips. Sometimes it just won't be, depending on the sports team. So for instance, we couldn't send the football team, we couldn't send there are teams that just won't fit on it.
Sure.
So that kind of brings down the number of teams that could go. And then you look at the number of times that we have away games and home games. So you'd think you have a 20-game schedule, but 10 of those are home. So you've got basically 10 trips per team times the number of teams, and then the number of times your team would fall onto that ability to take a trip. But it could certainly be as high as 35. So then you'd be up over 100 trips during the season. It'll have to be, as I learn what our schedule's like and where our tendencies are, that number can fluctuate.
Okay, so then I was correct. So, because you're talking about 3 seasons in a school year, not 3 seasons over the course of 3 calendar years.
No.
Right, no, I'm talking, the fall season, the winter season, and the spring season, we would realize the cost for a bus during those seasons of those 75 trips would be the $25,875, minus the same monies that we would spend if we had the van, realizing the savings of $11,000.
So we are talking about saving approximately $22,000
Right.
per
Right.
budget
Right.
year.
3 seasons is 1 school year.
Right, okay.
No, you're talking
Yes.
about 11,000 per school year.
No, because, and this is, yeah, it's hard to follow the numbers, I agree. So the estimated 25 trips per season, that's 75 trips per year.
Correct.
Right.
At a cost of $25,875
Per year,
per year.
not per season.
Correct.
Per 3 seasons, right.
Right.
So
But the bottom part where it says 25,875 minus 14,096.80, that includes $12,000 in car payments that we're not going to make if we bought it outright.
Correct. Over 7 years, correct, yep.
Right.
So the savings.
So savings would be
Well,
like
you still have
13.4.
to amortize the cost of this van over whatever number of years
I-
you're talking about.
that's- that-
I
but
mean,
yeah, but
it
that's-
doesn't completely go away.
No, I know, but that's a somewhat different story. I mean, we could finance it and be saving $11,000 a year, or if we bought it outright, we are theoretically saving $22,000 a year, or something like that. Correct?
It would be
I-
a $2,000
No.
savings a year financed over 6 years, because it's a $12,000 total finance cost. So over a 6-year finance period, that'd be $2,000 a year.
So
it
the
would be an
cost of your
additional-
van is still 10,000 a year. Even if you put the money out up front.
The
If you're
cost to
amortizing,
operate
no, the cost of the van itself, right? You're paying
If- right, if you're gonna-
$60,000 for it. If you run that
Should I
over
make this
over
a-
the course of 6 years,
Yes.
10,000, right? As opposed to 12,000 in
Cost is in here.
payments. So it's really just a $2,000
I know.
differential.
Doesn't matter.
I understand it's cash out, but just trying to understand, make everyone understand that you can't just throw away the $60,000 payment and say, oh, we're saving that much money. We did pay for the van.
No, right, that was what I was getting to, was the van eventually pays for itself in 3 years or 5 years.
Well, I'd also argue that what I'm hearing is we never have buses to bring kids anywhere.
Right,
And
and-
you're actually going to add trips.
Yeah, so let's.
It's not
yeah.
going to save us on our transportation costs beyond what it is today, because you don't have the buses available now.
No, as
That's what I'm
80
hearing
grand,
the
I mean,
reason
the
for this was.
25, the trips he's based upon are actual trips that we are paying buses for now. Anything above that, for example, middle school, it's just the convenience factor, providing for our athletes and for our families. So it has a dual purpose here. And to your point, Ms. Farmer, I wouldn't want that to be lost, that we can now provide trips that we always should have been providing for these athletes.
But let's not, pretend this is just about savings. This is
No,
gonna
no,
be
absolutely, it's
to-
not about saving. And again, there's going to be opportunities during the day. Multiple field trips take place during the day for classes at the high school, sometimes in the middle school. We have kids going to government things like that. There's a lot of other things that we haven't quantified in here, but are going to be able to take care of this way and save us some money.
And there are no requirements that we contract out transportation in state law or anything like that. I know, Mr. Grant, you're referencing, I'm not sure if you're referencing Massachusetts districts or Rhode Island that are using vans regularly. Is it something we see at our meets, that other schools
Oh,
are using these vans?
When I go to AD meetings, all the ADs drive their school vehicles to their meetings, and they're all in the parking lot. They've got their shuttle vans. When you go to, Massachusetts, I'm sorry, but ski meets, but in Rhode Island, when I went to the summer workshop over at Rhode Island College, and you saw all the different schools' vans all in the parking lot. just
So are
like-
you expecting to use this as a company car?
Not for me. I don't, this wouldn't change any aspect of how I drive myself, and I'm just saying, when some ADs go to meetings, they will take a school van, but that's not something that I would do.
Okay.
I know that Middletown has a van.
But there's so many. It's the big.
Newport
it's-
has a van. Yeah.
Can I just ask one more? Sorry.
No, go ahead. I had the floor, but you take it.
No.
Go ahead.
I know this isn't the first time we've heard about this concept, and Dr. Sanchioni alluded to that. Can I ask why that wasn't on the capital request this year? And why all of a sudden it's such a...
It doesn't qualify for reimbursement from
But
RIDE.
that's not a requirement of asking for the
No.
funds from the town.
It's just coming down to our priorities and the funding we have available, things of that nature. So even though it's not on capital, we're presenting to you an ideal opportunity this evening.
Okay. And just lastly, I just also have a concern. This building experienced a major issue today. I don't know if we're going to be looking at expenses associated with what happened here today. And are we spending money that perhaps we should hold on to until we see what the costs of that may be?
I wouldn't recommend that because from what we understand took place today, and again, I referenced to you that the reimbursement was $90,000. The delta between the van and any repairs we have here would be covered.
Okay. Thank you.
So would the coaches get or require, or whoever is driving this, some sort of training? And is that going to be an issue with the collective bargaining unit?
I don't know what training they would need other than just showing how they would work. You could buy one of these for your home and have it for your family. You might not have a 15-passenger, but it's a van that you would have normally. It'll have an extend in the rear where you can put equipment bags and whatnot. But otherwise, it'll be the bench seating like you'd have in a family-type van. So it's nothing tricky. Brakes are the same. Mileage is 16 miles per gallon, so it's very similar to what you'd have in a Ford Expedition or a Chevy Suburban or anything like that.
I guess I'm trying to envision a 15-passenger van versus a four-door sedan, and how difficult or how different that is. But they would not require training per se.
No, in terms of parking, too, you would park off. When you see teams come to us, they park their buses way off to the side. It isn't like you'd be taking it to a shopping mall where you have to be precise and going in. You can take up 2 spots. You can put it out of the way so it's not near anybody. You don't really want people parking next to it if you can help it, because the kids will be sliding doors and equipment and whatnot. You don't want that banging up against other people's cars and things. So in terms of that, just giving them a checklist of what to do to be responsible to protect the van. But in terms of from an operational standpoint, it's exactly the same as their car.
Okay. And have we talked to our automobile insurance vendor, and they say, yeah, there's no
Just add it to the fleet.
issue here? Okay. All right, I guess those are my big questions. Go ahead, Diane.
Would our coaches be required to be drivers, or would this be a voluntary thing?
I don't think we could require them, no. So it'll be a voluntary thing. I've never had anybody say no to it because they love the fact that they can control the time going back and forth, and just the ability to go at a whole different route and turning, and it just gives you an easy 15-minute advantage in terms of a bus and being able to maneuver it, whatnot. And that's not a reason to get it, certainly, but certainly the coaches driving it are what help enhance the savings aspect of it. But if you went worst-case scenario and we had a 4-hour bus trip and you had to pay somebody $25 to $30 an hour on an average trip of anywhere from $365 to $400, you're still going to realize a savings of $300 plus if we had to pay a driver $120. But I don't see that being an issue.
And in that type of a scenario, would that driver be easily covered by our insurance policy as well, if they're not a district employee?
Well, they would become a district.
Right,
They
they'd
become a
become one.
district employee.
Yep.
They would become a district employee.
They would be paid by the district.
Yeah.
That's an independent contractor, though, still.
They would go through our payroll system.
Okay?
Because we own the van, we would, the legalities of having an independent contractor operate that van are hairier than if it was one of our employees. So we would pay them through payroll, FICA, they'd be
Okay.
covered by workers' compensation, it would be all the same. The rate that they would be paid would be something similar to what Mr. Grant suggested.
I would just maybe put your minds at ease and echo what Coach Grant just said, too, that, I have a lot of experience with this also, and I've never seen a coach denied driving. So, I guess anything could happen, but again,
I
it's
just
such an
wouldn't want it to
advantage.
be mandatory. I mean,
No,
certainly
it's-
Dr. Larkin
yeah,
mentioned
we
about,
wouldn't
the
make it
collective
mandatory.
bargaining agreement. We
Yeah.
don't want to run afoul of that.
And we'd have choices in the afternoon, too. So if we had a coach that did express some uncomfortableness about driving, then we would just switch tennis with golf or golf with baseball and move that coach around without any issue.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the committee? And any questions from the public or from any of our administrators available online? Okay, so there's been a motion made and seconded to approve the purchase of a van for $60,149. Any other discussion before I take a vote? Or if anyone would like to make any subsidiary amendments to the main motion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a vote. Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
I'm going to abstain.
Mrs. Farnworth?
I would like to amend the motion if is that still a possibility?
Yeah, I think I can rule to allow an amendment even in the midst of the vote.
I apologize.
Okay. It's being like the Supreme Court.
I know. So I'd like to amend the motion to include an amount up to $60,149 contingent upon the receipt of the official final amount and accompanying documentation to be presented to this board.
Before the
At a
purchase is
future meeting.
executed?
If the amount doesn't go above $60,149, that'll be fine. It can come after at another meeting.
Okay, so if I can rephrase your motion.
Thank you.
It would be to, and this is an amendment to the main motion, that the amount stipulated of $60,149, if it is to be exceeded, would require documentation prior to the purchase. If, however, the purchase is at $60,149 or less, the documentation may be furnished to the committee after the purchase.
Yes, I agree.
So that's the amendment to the motion made by Mrs. Farnworth. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so now we're going to vote on any discussion. So now we're going to vote on the amendment to the main motion with the stipulations as expressed. Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
I'm going to abstain still.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. So now the motion is that the committee approves $60,149 for the purchase of a van. If the amount is to exceed that, then then the purchase should be held until additional documentation is provided to the committee. If the purchase is that or less, then the purchase can be made, but we would like the documentation provided to the committee eventually. If I have that right. So now
Eventually.
at the next meeting
Thank you.
following the purchase.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to ask for a vote now on the main motion as expressed. Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
Abstain.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So the motion passes 3-0-1. Okay, thank you, Mr. Grant.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Go get us a van.
Thank you.
Nice job.
So now I'd like to move back to item 7, I think, A, strategic plan.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Larkin. In your packet, you have an outline of our strategic plan. You have the goals and the objectives that fit under each goal. And you know this process has been going now on for approximately a year. We've received feedback from you initially. We've worked with multiple teacher groups, parent feedback from surveys and so forth. So we're getting to a point where we want to bring this to finalization and bring it back to the committee one last time to to have you vote it and make it the strategic plan for the next 5 years. So this is an opportunity to update you on our progress, where we're at, and the final steps before we bring it back to you. So with that being said, we're fortunate to have our consultant here again this evening, Dr. McEwen. So if you want to come on up, if you want to, you can either go to the podium. If you'd like to sit, you can sit in the chair. Whatever's better for you. Have a seat, relax, yes. Great to have you here, Dr. McEwen.
Nobody really relaxes in those seats over there,
No,
by
I
the
know.
way.
Well, thank you for having me, and I don't know, should I be looking anywhere? Okay. Thanks for having me again. It's good to see you all. As Dr. Sanchioni said, we have been working on this plan for close to a year. And I think not to put too fine a point on it, we should be really impressed with the work that has happened thus far. It's been heartening to see the way teachers have responded to this. So you know the process that we've gone through. At Dr. Sanchioni's behest, I met with every faculty, asked teachers their initial thoughts, and that's what helped us get to this document. So what you see in here about some of the goals, the strategies, the objectives thus far really came from our educators here in Tiverton. We then sent that out to the community. There was a survey that went out to the community. We received feedback on sort of initial goal ideas and objectives. That was all positive. And then this summer, we took it back to a group of leaders, of teacher leaders. And I want to thank you, Dr. Larkin and Mr. Dakota, so you were able to be there for that time. That gave us even better information about the way we want to undertake the strategic plan and the best strategies for moving forward. And I think what we got there was a lot of really positive reinforcement about the initial goals and objectives, and some questions that people wanted to ask about timelines, the reasonableness of certain strategies, what should come first and what should go next. And so now we've come to a place where we really have some very strong goals and some objectives. And one of the things we'd like to work on with the administrative team, and get your feedback as well, is making sure that as we identify objectives and deadlines for each of those within the major goals, that we are utilizing strategies that are our highest leverage, right? So that we can manage to meet multiple objectives at once, and we can put the right efforts in the right buckets at the right time frame. And so that's really our next step, is to take the feedback that we got in August, take any feedback that this committee wishes to give, and then go back to the Administrative Council and get this written out in a way that you and the public can fully understand, will be fully transparent, and will work, be a working document that the administration can give you feedback on at regular intervals. I think that's sort of an update of where we are now, Dr. Sanchioni.
Well, it's a nice summary, thank you.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you want to go through maybe the
Sure.
goals to some extent?
Sure. So let me just pull these up. So we have four major areas for our goals. The first is around academic excellence, and that first one, it looks like it was cut off, but the first one has actually been realized. The first goal was to develop the portrait of a graduate, and that has been developed. Obviously, the development is a first step. That will be, oh, thank you, yeah, I have that
Make
in
it
another
easy for
tab, too. That's a first step for the work, is the development of a portrait of a graduate. That becomes the North Star from which everything flows. And so, I don't necessarily have to go through all of them, but as we said, that's the North Star. And then from each of these, the alignment of curriculum, even the way we meet students' needs, is all aligned to what it is that we hope for from our graduates. As you see there, we've got a number of strategies and objectives, and those dovetail with our strategic goal number 3, which is around our educator development, our workforce employee development. And so those dovetail there. Are there any questions about goal 1 and the objectives? I'm not going through every single one before I move on to the second.
I'll open it up to the members of the committee. Mike?
No, as you said, I was there, so I get to hear a lot of it and see it through. Thank you.
Elaine? Elaine?
No questions, thank you.
Dan?
Just one small one. The curriculum will be aligned to the TPS Portrait of a Graduate, and I know we've heard in several meetings about the Portrait of a Graduate. Can you give me an example in which a way you can align that curriculum to it?
Yeah, and I'll let Dr. Sanchioni jump in as well, but in places where I work, this becomes a really important point. So in a Portrait of a Graduate, we're trying to develop multiple facets of a student, right? And so I'd have to be looking at yours, and I'm not right now, but I know that there's, I think, a development of empathy. Often there's critical thinking, creative thinking, curiosity, innovation, and I'm talking about them in general, not about yours in particular. I think I have that in a folder, but not in front of me.
They're right up there.
There we go. So critical thinking, that's wonderful. When we think about that, right, so there are specific skills that go into critical thinking. And actually, that I think you'd understand in traditional curricula. When we look at something like collaboration, collaboration is a skill that we can teach our students, and we can teach that through academics. So there are certain academic strategies that we can use that really enhance collaboration for our students and allow them to synergistically work together so that they're creating even deeper understandings than they might on their own. When we codify that into curriculum, we can codify that with some example strategies that teachers might use in a classroom. That dovetails beautifully with some of the work you're doing around employee development and some of the work you've already done, I think, with the Rebus material, which we colloquially refer to as the Green Book here in Tiverton. Some strategies that can be used that are research-based strategies that both help students learn content and skills in an academic discipline, while they also engage in the skill of collaboration. A curriculum that specifically ties the Portrait of a Graduate competencies to the traditional academic curriculum just ensures that you're going to meet both goals.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Let's move on to 2.
All right. So our second one is extremely important, right? This is student well-being, and I believe today or yesterday was Mental Health Awareness Day. We know that in Tiverton and elsewhere, our students have pre-pandemic, through pandemic, and now coming out on the other side, we've become very attuned to students' needs around well-being. So the commitment there is that Tiverton is a healthy, safe, and supportive environment that nurtures all students' intellectual, physical, mental, and social emotional growth in preparation for deeper learning. We have focused, and this again came through the meetings that we had with your faculty, that attendance is a key component of students' well-being. We want to make sure that they're here and that they are learning when they should be learning, and then when they're not here, we're able to figure out why and support them. We talked a lot, the Administrative Council, about number 3, every student will be able to identify one trusted adult, and the strategies that we're going to try to undertake to make sure that we can do that, do some relationship mapping and support all of our students. And then, again, I won't read through all of them, but this is an extremely important goal, so let me see if you have any questions about it.
Okay, I'll open it up to the members of the committee. Diane?
I'll jump right into the attendance.
Sure.
I do understand the importance of attendance. Don't misunderstand me at all. I'm trying to understand how that ties with a goal around student well-being, first of all, and then secondly, to quantify a maximum of 9 days per school year. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm thinking back to, the decades ago when I was a student, and one year I got bronchitis and had to miss school for 2 weeks. Bam.
Sure.
There's my 10 days. Oh, wait a minute, I'm only allowed 9. And what happened if I had something else going on? That my question is, what's the benefit of actually putting a 9-day max in your strategic plan?
I'm going to take you off the hook on that.
That's more of a policy
Dr.
thing.
McEwen.
No, it's a great question. It came up in our...
Yeah, it's based partly on the RIDE model. As you know, student attendance is part of the rating system for all of our schools. And I think sometimes you have to set a criteria for students to understand. And certainly in the example you expressed, we would certainly overlook that if you had medical documentation that you were out for bronchitis or anything like that. But we want to get students to understand they need to be here. And when you put, if it's arbitrary, if it doesn't have a criteria with it, then it just doesn't have the teeth, it doesn't have the power that we want it to have. So 9's the number. We don't want any student to miss more than that unless there's some kind of medical documentation to coincide with that.
But again, isn't that more of a matter of policy as opposed to a goal in your strategic plan? Just trying to understand how that relates here.
So the goal itself is
a
student
goal.
well-being, right? And the attendance is a strategy under the well-being goal. And so you can't be well, you can't get the benefits of your education, you can't get the benefits of all the services we provide here at school unless you're here. And so that's how it ties in.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine.
I have no questions.
Mike?
No.
Okay. Okay.
I do want to say that the questions like that are exactly why I think we're here, and those came up when we met with teacher leaders, when we met with others. What's the value of putting specific numbers in? What isn't? How can we frame those? And so I think we take all of these back and we determine how we can set forth goals that are aspirational and still understand any realistic concerns. So we thank you for sharing that. Our third goal is around employee development, which I think is extremely important. And I can't stress enough that meeting that we had. First of all of the meetings that we had, every school, every faculty was so engaged in the process, so willing to share their thoughts about this, so desirous of a plan that would move us all forward. And I think that came forward in all of the meetings that I had at each faculty. But that meeting that we had this summer, and again, I think Dr. Larkin and Mr. Dakotas, you might concur, it was really powerful. It was a group of people who asked questions, pushed back on things, pulled on some things, but was really an energetic force in the room. And so in that stead, we come to something that's really important, employee development, right? This is the meat of what you do is support your teachers so that they can get the best from students. So the goal is to become a culture of equitable and empowered learning that develops individual and shared professional goals while executing continuous improvement through collective efficacy and shared responsibility for student learning. So there's a lot there around professional development. You'll see this notion of an induction or mentoring program for new teachers, and so on, and the support of leaders in district administration in that. So again, I'll take questions to see if there's some feedback.
Mr. Dakotas?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Mrs. Pavo?
I'm all good.
Mrs. Farnworth?
I hate to be the one.
No, this is great.
One of these objectives, I'm wondering if you shouldn't consider expanding on it, and that's objective number 4. Objective number 5. Every secretary, custodian, and teacher assistant will be provided ongoing job-embedded professional development. I'm wondering about professional development of your administrators as well as your superintendent's office staff, who are not clearly outlined here. You have finance staff that could always benefit from professional development, and administrators as well. I mean, I just don't see them specifically mentioned here. It's just teachers and custodians, secretaries, TAs.
Sure, we're just checking to see if that, we might thought we covered that somewhere else, because it's certainly not intended to mean that that's not important, I think
Right.
would be correct, right? Dr. Sanchioni?
On the first one, when it talks to teachers, when we talk teachers, that's all of our professional staff. I mean, our administrators are at all the training that our teachers are at, obviously, so that they can be part of that and be able to utilize the same skill set when they're evaluating or supervising our staff. So, but we can spell out some of the other groups that you
Yeah.
want. Yeah, that last one was sort of a catch-all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we
I'm
could consider
thinking-
language called educator.
Yeah,
really.
but I'm also thinking specifically, your office staff, and I'm looking at Amy right now. You have a business staff who may have different development needs than your teaching staff. And I just want to make sure that that is all part of the thought here, is that every employee is considered as someone that could take advantage or benefit from development of some kind.
That is the intention. And it is happening too, which is good to know. Amy's done some significant training with all her staff this year on e-finance. She's had training on it too. So to codify it, absolutely, we can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is why we're doing this, right, Dr.
Absolutely,
Sanchioni?
you're doing it.
All right, so we come to our last goal, around
Last but not least.
around finance and operations. You know, if we're not attentive to this, the rest of it doesn't happen. And so obviously the goal around student success is just put at the forefront. I think it's always there, but it's nice if we always think that it's there, but it's nice to put it forward in writing. And then we're talking about the capital plan, figuring out this financial structural deficit, and the one-to-one technology infrastructure are the major objectives under that strategic goal. Any questions here?
Okay. Mr. Dakotas?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Pavo?
Nothing.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Nothing, thank you.
And anything from our administrators or from the public, Mrs. Delcourt?
If I may, Dr. Larkin,
Yep.
I'd like to point out that we're already, thanks to Mrs. Farnworth's help, we're already on the track for the structural deficit, so we're well on our way to getting.
We're trying.
Well, we've commenced that process,
That's right.
which is a huge step, and so and then also the district has worked on a capital plan, so I'm hoping that they all come to fruition soon.
Okay, thank you. So, Peter, you're looking for a vote on this, correct?
Nope, not tonight. Tonight
Oh.
was feedback. As Dr. McEwen said earlier, we're going to take this back to the Ad Council and add some more strategies to all the goals and so forth, and we will bring it back to for a final vote.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. McEwen. Nice
Thank
job
you.
as always.
Thank you for joining.
Okay, we are up to item 7C, request to move January 10th meeting to January 3rd. Peter?
Thank you, Dr. Larkin. Later on in the agenda, you have all the school committee dates. We've made the amendments that you had suggested, and I wanted to ask if you would consider moving the 10th to the 3rd, only because that's a date that I'm at a superintendent's conference that I'm scheduled to present that and so forth, so certainly your consideration.
Okay, I'll ask for a motion to do that, to open discussion.
I'll second that.
Do we need a vote for that?
Well, I would say you're going to vote under old business B, so that's why I kind of timed it that way.
Well, I will have other suggestions on that too, so. I mean, I don't have any objections to January 3rd, unless someone else does.
It's okay by me. Elaine?
Okay,
Mike?
yes.
Okay by me.
All right, so we're moving the January 10th meeting to the 3rd. Next is, and do you want to take up 8B first, Peter or Diane?
I'm sorry, Dr. Larkin?
Do you want to take up 8B first, because it's
Sure,
about
it probably
school
is a little
committee
quicker,
dates?
and that will leave just a structural deficit discussion, so that would make sense. Thank you.
So discussion, possible vote, school committee dates.
Okay, so you may recall from the last meeting, we had presented you dates that would get us through the rest of the school year, although we do work off a calendar year. There were several recommendations to additions and changes. We made all those. The only other change now is what you just voted, the 10th to the 3rd. So you have the dates presented to you this evening.
Okay, so this is the January 22 to December 23. January 20,
Can I make a suggestion?
yeah.
That we take this up at our next meeting after it gets cleaned up a little bit. It references January 22 in several places instead of January 23, and I think the quote-unquote official version of this should start with January 23 and eliminate September, October, November of 22. So that way it will be ready for presentation and posting on the Secretary of State website.
So, yeah. So
It'll also
the
give you a chance
document
to
itself is
update the document to
inaccurate.
includes the January 3rd date as well.
So is there anything in particular about the dates themselves that anybody sees any issue with?
No, I think, as Dr. Sanchioni mentioned, everything that we had suggested or discussed at the
Right.
last meeting is included.
So, yeah. So the document itself should really read January 2023 through December 2023, and then take off September, October, November, December, because those aren't in that time.
The only thing I'd
period.
suggest to you is that we do put this on our website, and we'd rather have an inclusive document with all the, instead of someone having to go to look at two separate documents for 22 and 23, that's why we set it up this way. However, certainly your prerogative.
I know, as a parent, I went on just to look to see if I could find it, and I couldn't find it. So I think it would be good to be in one document, in one place, at least on our website, on our.
Yeah,
what we have
that's
to
the
offer.
intention, right? As soon as you approve it, we'll,
So instead, we would have it, the document labeled September 2022 to December 2023. So right now, the document says January 2022 to December 2023. But it
Yeah, those are
actually
the new
starts.
dates, those are the dates we're asking you to approve. You've already approved September to December. Those are carryovers from the.
Correct,
yeah.
right. But the document itself actually includes September through December of 2022, which, to, I guess, Mike's point or someone's point, it makes sense to have the entire school year's worth of school committee meetings in a single document somewhere on the website, even though some of them have passed, or will have passed. Yes, have passed. 3 of them have passed.
I'll just remind you of the state requirements to post this annually in calendar form.
Well, we can,
That's what I would like to actually take the vote on. You can post whatever you'd like on the district website.
okay. So you would like to take the vote on the dates from January 2023 to December 2023, which are included on this document. Would you like to make that motion?
I'd like to see it as a separate document.
See it as a separate document in a school committee
We
meeting?
have
you mean?
this discussion every single
I know
year,
we
and I
do.
push for it
It's
every single year. I'd like to see it
fabulous.
simply as a calendar document. We are the public body that is required to file this with the state. I fully understand the desire to put things on the school website. That's fine, but this is a document that goes to the state.
But, so we can, I believe, approve the dates from January 23 to December 23, irrespective of whatever documents in front of us. Right?
We can,
You would rather not do that
but I'd
tonight?
like to do so when I know that the document I'm looking at is the one that will be posted to the Secretary of State's website. That is the purpose of our vote.
Okay. Anyone else have any other comments, Mike or Elaine?
No?
Elaine, anything?
Nothing.
So, all right. I guess what I would recommend is that we have the documents reformatted, one that we can approve as the dates from January to December 2023, one that we can post on the website, which is a little bit more expansive and includes all the dates for this school year, because people will still reference that over the next couple months and be looking at November and December.
Okay, so you want to approve that tonight, and with the understanding we will execute it that way?
Well, someone would actually have to make a motion to that effect, but I don't hear anyone terribly interested in making any motions. So,
think we have ample time.
Yeah, we can do it next meeting. All right. I just lost my agenda. So I'm going to go up to item 8A, structural deficit. Ms. Roderick?
Did Dr. Larkin not say Miss Farnworth,
Oh.
not Miss Roderick?
Well, you know, I was actually looking at your...
Your name's on the agenda.
Yeah, your name was on the agenda, so...
Oh, it is.
Is
Okay,
that-
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I'm sorry.
So you can, I mean,
I like
Dr.
the
Larkin, if you
dramatic
don't-
pause, though.
I'm sorry. My,
I like the dramatic pause.
I thought perhaps you'd want to lead the discussion because you had put together all these numbers.
absolutely, I just heard Dr. Larkin say Mrs. Farnworth, so I was trying to be respectful
Oh,
and let
no,
you
I
start.
said, I think I said Roderick, but
Okay, or perhaps I heard it
Maybe.
No,
correctly.
you did say Roderick. I'll back
maybe
you
I
up.
said it in Spanish.
But when I watch it on camera later, I'll know if I'm wrong or
Unlikely.
not.
You're really going to
Pull
go
the red
home and
flag.
watch this?
Challenge flag.
Challenge.
Challenge flag.
So, Ms.
Okay,
Roderick.
Thank you. As part of our ongoing structural deficit discussion, the committee had asked both Dr. Sanchioni and I to prepare some additional information or more detailed information about our perceived, I guess, pain points. I'll use the proverbial quotes. And so it was special education, transportation, utilities, and I also prepared personnel and benefits just as a point of information. And so the first slide, and I apologize, I don't have an electronic copy, is the 5-year historical regional payment. I believe that's in your packet. It's page 12. Oh, I'm sorry. It's number 8A? 8A. And so we, and so as you can see, for the last 5 years, or from actually 6 years, including the upcoming 2023 budget, our cost has gone up and then it's come down a bit, and that is also a function of what I would call ODP utilization or special needs utilization on a regional level, which is also apportioned by students, the number of students in each. And this includes services that are provided to Tiverton students for special needs of varying levels. So, in 1 year, we can have a particularly, concentration of severely special needs students who require more intensive services. In other instances, we have students with less severe needs. And so, I'd like to point out that in 2021, we did get a quote-unquote, I'll call it a refund of some prior year fund balance because the services that were expected to be provided did not occur, and that came back to us as part of the audit. And we did record that as prior year revenue on the financial statements. That is an anomaly. I'm not expecting a whole lot more money, although I wish every year we could get $300,000 back. But again, a lot of the regional expense depends on the number of students enrolled who need those services, how those services are delivered in professionals in the classroom here or within the school. And we have a budget meeting with the region every year, and we go into a whole lot of detail to come up with this. There's, unfortunately, I don't think there's a whole lot that we can do to reduce this unless somehow we were to just bring everything in-house, and I don't believe that necessarily would be any less expensive.
So, Amy, if I could just gloss this, we're looking at the chart on page 12 of the total document.
Correct.
And it starts at the bottom, 2017, 2018, it was $1.9 million. It was adjusted for a total payment to the region, but that was for special education needs that occurred through the region, some of which may have actually physically occurred in Tiverton, some of which may have occurred in Middletown, probably not Little Compton necessarily. Do I have that right?
So I guess, well, I'm sorry?
God, if you need help.
No, I'm all set. So, the answer to your question is it's a combination. So some of the, I'm using the term administrative costs are spread and apportioned across the 3 districts. However, many of, for example, if we have a regional psychologist who's working at Fort Barton, for example, okay, those are services being directly given to Tiverton students.
Right.
So, like, the administration is apportioned, but the direct services from the region to Tiverton students are what we pay for.
Yeah, that's what's in the $1.9 million.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So and maybe I didn't express it completely appropriately, but it's sort of money that's being paid by Tiverton into the region for services to Tiverton.
Correct.
Okay. And that was 1.9 million in 2017-18, then it went to 1.8, 1.9, 1.6. For 2022, 2023, projected, I'm assuming, or budgeted, is 1.559.
Correct.
Okay. So it's actually gone down a bit in the last 3 to 4 years.
Correct.
Okay.
Now,
Yep, go ahead.
part of that, not all of it, but part of that reduction, initially in the years like 2018, 2019, before I got here, part of the regional expense was for transportation for some of those students, and now that all falls on us.
Right.
That changed, and that now falls on us under statewide transportation.
So it's
So
in a
it's
different
kind of a
line
shift.
item.
Yep.
Got it. Do you have a sense of what the actual decrease in cost was?
Off the top of my head, I do not, but I can certainly get that for you.
You have statewide transportation.
I do.
Quoted on another one of the,
Absorbing
We do,
staff.
but it's not necessarily also a one-for-one, and the reason for that is that the state of Rhode Island and RIDE have taken over the statewide transportation, and their formula for calculating what your portion is almost like rocket science to me, and so it.
worse than the funding formula?
Beg your pardon?
Worse than the funding formula?
Well, it's only because we have yet to be able to identify what those elements are. Whenever we call to find out, depending on who you talk to, you get a different answer. So that is still on my agenda to address. So it is not necessarily a one-for-one, and because the statewide transportation is now a shared service, and it depends on the utilization, so on and so forth, statewide.
Although it sort of does seem to correlate roughly.
You do
of several
see
$100,000.
a little bit, yeah.
A bit of a shift that you can assume a fair chunk of the statewide transportation costs are for special needs
Correct.
students.
Correct.
Right. And it started out at 0 in FY19 and then is up to 600,000 in FY23. And there, although
No, I know. it's
as
not- I
Amy
know.
was saying, it's not a one-to-one, it is a
But some of
rough,
as well as OEP.
well, if anything, you'd expect, yeah, if it were one-to-one, then actually our costs are going up still.
Right, but it's not.
Yeah.
But
If
it's
I
not.
Could add a little more detail to your question, Dr. Larkin. The other part that's, the cost goes down, but it's still maintained in our budget is through attrition, every time there's a regional employee who works solely in Tiverton, we're taking them under our contract.
Okay.
And so the funds shift from the payment to the region to
Maybe
our
the case
personnel
in another
budget.
year anyway. Okay, great, thank you. Anybody else have any other questions about page 12, that 5-year historical
No.
regional payment?
Amy, you mentioned for this current fiscal year, you have an adjustment for negative 241,000. Is that a one-time thing? Can you?
That is a one-time thing. That is, again, that is not going to be refunded to us. That is similar to the 300,000 in that was a fund balance, I guess, refund that we're going to be applying to our current year regional assessment versus getting it refunded. There were some, due to COVID, there was less utilization than was initially anticipated. And so, again, there was additional fund balance that went back to the 3 communities. However, again, we're not expecting that to happen. These are 2 sort of lucky strikes thanks to COVID.
Okay.
This can help go toward us trying to address this structural deficit.
Yeah, it's basically, it's a good understanding of fixed and mandated cost, right?
Mhm. It is. It is. I guess I'll just throw it out to the committee, just looking at these costs. Obviously, there's very little we can, quote-unquote, control, right? We are required to, and we do want to provide the best education in the least restrictive
Environment.
way. The question will always come back, should we consider the benefits of bringing it back in-house, if there are financial benefits? I know that a couple of years ago, you were able to open a classroom at the middle school to actually bring down some of the out-of-district placements. I see them ticking back up. Is that classroom still running?
It is.
It is.
Yep.
You're up to 47 at the end of June, and that's the highest number you have in the history that we're looking at. Is that expected to continue to grow? Is that an anomaly this year? Or does that stand now? Because with it being June 30th versus October, has that changed significantly at all?
So we'd have to get an answer to you regarding, has it changed at all? What we can say to you, though, it does fluctuate, and I can speak to the fact that we've had students move into town over the last year that required these services. So it's just a byproduct of a lot of different factors that sometimes drive your numbers up or drive your numbers down.
Oh, it's definitely a moving target. I
Yeah.
totally understand that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can talk about that when we get to the ODP, but, yeah.
Right.
Any other questions about the 5-year historical regional payment from the members of the committee?
Nothing.
No? Okay,
Okay, so we are on to out-of-district placement.
there we go.
Great segue. And I will ask, if you have questions about the actual enrollment, Dr. Sanchioni assisted me with that, or he did it, basically. So you had the one question, I don't know if you have any others, but, so the out-of-district placements obviously have gone up quite a bit. The cost of all services have gone up, just in general. Anecdotally, you could probably consider these also one of the inflation-impacted, impacted expenses. Also, the service providers, like everyone else, receiving raises. The organizations providing those services obviously want to stay in business, so they have to adjust. And again, it really is a function of the students and where they are best served. And those costs are literally, the charges are just passed on to us. I'm not aware of any sort of negotiation for that. So
These are strictly tuition payments.
Correct.
payments for services, yes. So in some instances, some of the students,
Just tuition.
just tuition? Okay.
It's interesting to see the growth in this number. I mean, the number of students hasn't grown substantially.
So, yeah, the number of students is 14% rise, and the cost is a 70% rise.
It's, just thinking of
$900,000.
Is there anything we as a district can do to perhaps try to serve any number of these students in-house?
Yeah, and absolutely.
With the supports that they need, of
Absolutely.
course, with the professionals they need.
And so you've already referenced that classroom at the middle school, which was an attempt to do that, and a successful attempt to do that. So we have students who've been brought back from that. And so we sit and analyze every one of these students annually. So it's almost like a zero-based budgeting approach to see if there's any synergy there, any collective needs that we can bring in form a classroom. So I can say with you with great confidence that every one of these kids is beyond the expense, what we could do. Yeah.
Right, and, I think the point is not to not give the services that are required.
Oh, no.
It is to make the citizens understand this is what's going on with our budget, and this is why the costs are rising. That if we have a $900,000 increase from 2017 to 2022, that is, that eats up any other incremental increase we have year on year really quickly, whether that be an increased state aid or sort of the generosity of the citizens when they vote our budget. But it's gotten, that's one of the answers here, is that our district placements went up $900,000 in that interval. That had to be funded somehow.
And that's each and every year. I mean, it just continues to rise.
And to reiterate what Dr. Sanchioni said, these are fixed and mandated.
Oh, no, I don't think any of us is questioning that at all.
I meant more for the public's edification. This is not something that's necessarily negotiable in any way.
Now, I know as part of the funding formula, there is a component that's called high-cost special ed. Does any of that get impacted by the out-of-district placements? Would we be getting higher reimbursements as a result of this, and how much does it impact it?
That's a direct correlation. So I was just writing down that we should show you the amount of revenue we're taking in and the high-impact special needs, and also in our IDA grant for all special needs. So we can create another chart on that.
But that doesn't
It doesn't come close to the
come
increase,
close to
yeah.
meeting the increased costs.
No, but I think we all need to understand.
Yeah.
In the formula for the definition of a high-cost special needs student, they keep raising what the bar is. So, if you think, student XYZ, we could put these in the worksheet that we submit to RIDE. And last year, they qualified as what they call a high-cost special need. This year, they don't, because instead of doubling whatever that threshold is, it's usually 2 or 3 times a calculated threshold. And so, it went from 2 times that to 3 times that. So it makes the bar harder to reach. Thank you, RIDE.
Well, it is interesting, interesting, probably not, again, nothing that we can do about it terribly, but, most of the increase is actually in the fiscal year 18 to 19, or from 2018 to 2019, and the number of students remained flat. It was probably just increased costs of whatever services we needed to provide. Okay, this is cheerful.
Anything else before I go on? No? Okay, on the next slide, number 14, just for everyone's edification, I put what our total personnel costs are, the percent increase per the contracts, and as well as the total benefits across all 52,000 series categories. And so, our total, quote-unquote, budget with both combined has actually come down in the last few years, and that's based on the funding and the cuts that we made. And that was even absorbing 3 and 3.5% increases in the contracts for both NEA and Council 94 in 19, 20, and 21. So, like I said, this is a summary page just for everyone's edification. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So, again, I think it's important to, again, recognize that from FY '20 to '21, our payroll went down by about, well, a little over $400,000. That was teachers cut. staff
Teachers and
cut.
other staff, yeah.
Yeah,
Correct.
not just teachers, but.
Correct.
And our payroll is actually down, so you can't make the argument that the rising costs are going to rising salaries. They're actually down from what they were in FY '19
Correct.
by about almost $800,000. No, more than that, actually.
You have
1.2
2 years in
million.
a row of it declining.
Yeah.
3, if you want to include the one that we're in now.
Well, and from FY '19 to FY '23 budgeted, it's down by $1.2 million.
It is.
Which is about 4% or a little less of our entire budget.
Now, I think we also need to remember, and I think Dr. Sanchioni, you had put this, I think in one of our previous documents, right, that a percent of this number or a certain dollar amount within this is currently being by one-time funds. Or is this outside of that?
This is strictly our operating budget. This does not take into account our one-time fund, so.
Not including ESSER-funded positions?
No, this is strictly,
Okay.
and I put it that way because we were addressing the structural deficit, so I kept things into the that were included in the operating budget.
Okay.
Only, so, yes.
Okay.
So the reductions that we see here, if we were to add in, we made up for some of those, but not all of those reductions with one-time monies.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. Good to be reminded.
Yeah, so, I mean, the numbers there, if FY '21 was 23 staff members and FY '22 was another 9, so 32 staff members over those 2 years. I mean,
Right.
Okay. If you have nothing further, I'm going to hop on to the wonderful world of technology. So this slide, I know, is very accountant-ish in terms of, but I wanted you to see which object codes fall into the category, quote-unquote, of technology. It's not just buying computers for one-to-one or Chromebooks for one-to-one. It's sort of many different things. And so, although one of the main drivers is we've invested in web-based instruction, and I think quite a bit of this tracks since Dr. Sanchioni came on board. Same thing for other technical services, and then, of course, the hardware. There was a big investment made in 19 and 20, and we're continuing to make replacements for those one-to-one Chromebooks and other devices, as well as operating software. Also everything now comes down to web-based, including the library, copiers, you name it. So most of this is self-explanatory, so I won't bore you with the details, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Why is the virtual high school in FY '22 such an outlier?
Because initially, so that is actually 100 to 110,000 of that is actually the Rhode Island Connections Academy for what the students that elected to learn remotely for that particular year. Initially, we had that as a line item in ESSER 3, and then when we were going over the budget last year and making some adjustments to the ESSER 3 spending, that came back and was absorbed by the operating budget. So that's a COVID factor. It's an outlier for one year.
And that was about $10,000 per student?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Anybody else with any questions about that?
No.
Can I just ask what the internet, budget for the internet went from 9,779 to up to 20,344? Seems like that's the only time it's really gone above that $9,000 to $11,000 mark.
Yeah, so just like everything else, I can tell you that in 21 and 22, There were some, I want to call them COVID benefits, in that a lot of the internet providers and so forth were either reducing their rates so to facilitate for other folks, and now they're catching us on the back end. So they've just raised their rates up to, almost exponentially. And in order for us to have internet, which is, I believe, Cox, is that right?
Yeah,
Dr.
Cox here.
Sanchioni? And especially with the sort of bandwidth we have with the one-to-one students and things like that, where they're like many of our other software providers and other technology areas, they're making it up, whatever generosity they provided us during COVID, they're making it up on the back end.
So before COVID, FY '20, it was 8,700. We went through 2 years of COVID, so it's like a almost 70, it's a 120% increase. Can we?
Now, again, so I estimated that for '23 last December. So we, certainly I can see where we're tracking for now and probably make an adjustment. I just didn't want to change any of these numbers to be anything different than what was published in the budget.
Right. So if this was, let's say this was just my personal, I have Cox for my internet. So in 2020, if my bill was $120 a month, that would be like my bill being $260 a month now.
No, I understand that.
Right.
However, what they charge commercial is very different than what they charge
Sure.
residential.
So I wonder if we can go to our state reps and ask them why.
Well,
There should be like a cap, shouldn't there?
I can certainly see where we're tracking with actuals.
Okay.
Like I said, I created this budget almost a year ago, and I was trying to forecast, potential increases. And so if we're not tracking there, certainly we can reallocate that money to somewhere else.
I
But
would love to see that. I'm sure pressure to them in the public eye probably to do that to a school system. It's not fair. It's almost like the buses.
exactly.
Did I say that? Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Might as well throw in the funding formula while you're talking to them.
Right?
Okay,
Any other questions thus far?
nope.
I don't have any questions, but I thank you for putting this out
Yeah,
in
that
this
was
type of
really
format,
helpful.
because it got us all thinking about it. And I think it proves to me, in something that we need to understand as a school board, that technology is here to stay.
It is. And
There's no
unfortunately,
going back here.
No, it's another fixed cost.
It is a fixed and mandated cost. We absolutely have to replace this hardware at regular intervals. We absolutely have to pay for the web-based instruction.
You have
I
to
understand you're buying less books now.
correct.
It's not a one-for-one, I understand that too. But this is the society that we're all in, and we need to prepare these kids for this society, not the society that existed in 1995.
Correct. And
Well said.
And there is a cost to that.
we would be doing them a disservice if we did that.
We'd go out of business. I'd hope we'd get
Okay,
voted
well,
out.
just to reinforce the point.
But no, good piece of discussion there. It is a major piece of our non-personnel budget, but it is also something that's very important and must be maintained.
Yes, absolutely. And next, our favorite conversation, our favorite topic, transportation. So I broke this out between our three main categories of transportation: bus monitors, statewide, and regular transportation. Regular transportation includes all transportation, including like athletics, field trips, and things like that. The only thing that are separated are the bus monitors as well as the statewide transportation. And so as you can see in 2019, we had no statewide transportation. That was part of the ODPs and the regional assessment, and it has gone up significantly since then. And it was in FY21 that RIDE took over the administration of the statewide transportation system or program and made it a cost share. Again, this year we're getting some enormous bills, and they have a whole new staff at statewide, so I have to start the process over of trying to, if I can get the formula and do the math, I'd be happy to share that with you when I get it. Again, unfortunately, that depends on for us, the number of students that have to participate in that. They base it on mileage, they base it on many different things. So if we have a student that goes hypothetically 100 miles away each day, that obviously that's going to cost us more than, someone who can go over to Portsmouth or Middletown or something like that. So, so the bus monitors, those are strictly per the contract. Initially, I had, again, almost a year ago now, had budgeted $500,000 for the monitors, trying to anticipate inflation because our bus contract goes up by the rate of inflation, or the change in the rate of inflation. For this year, I honestly don't believe it's going to be $500,000. I think it's going to be closer to the high threes, but certainly we can reallocate that to other areas. The calculated increase for FY23, it goes, it's the change in inflation from January 1st to December 31st of the prior year. So for FY23, our increase was actually based on, so for FY23, our inflation percentage is based on the change at December 31st of 2021. If you can follow the calendar math on that. So in this particular year, so when I estimated it at roughly, I think, 6 or 7%, again, not knowing where we would land, but knowing that inflation was increasing. It landed at just under 4%. And so, like I said, I believe that the bus monitors will come in much less than that, but at the time, this increase here was reflective of my estimate at the time, and I'm expecting that to come in a little bit under, because, like I said, our actual inflation change is about 4%, just under 4%. Now, for FY24, given that inflation has probably doubled that, our cost will probably go up close to 8%, and I believe that's what inflation is running right about now. And we also have, lucky us, there's a fuel adjustment clause in there as well. So as fuel goes up, if it goes up, and forgive me, I don't remember the exact details off the top of my head, but if it goes up over a certain percent, we're on the hook for not only just the increase in the service, but the increase in the fuel charge. And that has been in the contract for...
All this and canceled routes on top of it. Yay.
Yeah, because they can't find drivers. However, I will say that I am probably the uber stickler when it comes to if they've canceled a route for a particular day. I make sure that the billing reflects that. I don't let them get away with a single route. And I know it's small dollars, but the point is that we are being charged for every particular item in every way possible. I'm going to push back and make sure that we, if we're not being served for a particular route, we're not going to pay for it. Again, it adds up to small dollars in the grand scheme of things, but it's to make a point. And to First Students' credit, Sherry in particular, who tracks all the routes and so forth, has been very good about not charging us on those. So I don't want to say that, that they've been trying to sneak anything by us. They have not.
No. I would expect that they would be honest about that. It goes back to the old argument that they have a monopoly. And,
Speaking of reaching out to our legislature.
Speaking of which, but in the current financial environment in which we all live, there are so many industries, including transportation, including education, including healthcare, including banking, including restaurants and hospitality. The shortage of labor continues to persist.
And the costs associated with supply chain issues.
Yes.
And inflation are all impacting everything.
And it's going to be a very interesting process developing the '24 budget. Mm-hmm. On top of this discussion over the structural deficit, it's going to be scary thinking about how we're going to develop next year's budget. Because that just compounds it.
believe it or not, keeps me up at night. I'm already thinking, you know, when we get an invoice that's so much more than we expected, or I'm like, gee whiz, this is really how much this costs. And again, everyone's trying to sustain themselves, not only personally, but as a business and services that they provide and all of that. But everyone is taking it on the chin in the district in particular, again, because we have to provide, by law, we have to provide transportation to students.
Of course, and the other issue for us is that we can't just jack our fees. We don't charge fees.
To say what fees?
You know what I'm saying? We can't say, pass it along to the taxpayer. There's a maximum of 4% that we can get in any 1 year.
Right, and there are no additional fees, like in Massachusetts, you could charge certain other fees over
Right.
and above the tax appropriation.
Yes.
We're not allowed to do that.
State
in
law
Rhode
doesn't
Island.
allow it here.
Right.
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay.
And our next favorite subject, utilities. Again, I hope you're having as much fun with this accounting information as I am. In terms of, I quoted these, or I labeled these utilities, but Mrs. Farnworth, to your category of inflation-impacted expenses, the vast majority of other items that we already haven't spoken about, like transportation and so forth, are listed here. And so, you know, our disposal services, water, natural gas is going to go up, although these are the budgets that I had provided back in last December. You know, the largest cost that we're expecting to go up is electricity, but I'm also we're within a week of opening up the new fuel oil bid. That went out, and hopefully, I know we're not going to pay what we paid last year. It's probably going to be closer to 50% more if I had to guess. But again, at the time, almost a year ago, these were the best estimates I had. But these are fixed and mandated costs. 2 of our schools run on natural gas for heat, others run on fuel oil, and of course, there's the electricity. We have small dollar for gasoline, diesel, and propane for our equipment and so forth. That's not a huge impact. Our disposal services, though, we just got a notice saying that they're going up by close to 30%. And again, I did not estimate that at the initial time of the budget, but
Can that go up to bid?
you know, I have to do some research on that. I'm pretty sure we can. I need to get my hands on some historical information because I don't have a copy of the contract that apparently has been in place for many, many years. So that is on my radar and on my agenda to get to. I was focusing on the larger dollar items first.
Okay.
But that's not to say we can't do that ahead of budgeting for next year.
I know as consumers, we're all bracing for a huge electric increase beginning this month. Is not natural gas also rising?
It is, and
Pretty
also the
steadily.
delivery charges, so they break out your bill between the actual energy you use and the delivery service. And as a courtesy, they put it all on either your National Grid or Rhode Island energy bill and so forth. One of the things, again, that I hope to get to is seeing if we can change our delivery service and see if that will save us anything. I don't know if they're the same options for commercial entities. We're considered a commercial entity versus a residential. But that's also something that, you know, is it going to save us hundreds of thousands of dollars? Probably not, but every little bit helps, as we know.
Every little bit helps, every attempt helps.
Every attempt helps. So certainly some of these items are on my radar. Just haven't quite gotten there yet, so.
Okay.
And for now, that is the end of the accounting fund for this evening's meeting, but I'm happy to answer any other questions you folks might have at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Amy. That was
Thank you, Amy.
very helpful. Any other questions from any of the committee members? Mike?
Nothing.
Thanks, Mike. No, I'm good.
I was like, oh, Mike, your voice is changing.
Okay, thanks a lot, Amy.
You're
welcome. Can we just briefly discuss our next discussion? We have, right, this evening was the in-depth review of those expense drivers, and especially those pain points, if you will. And I think we went through them pretty well. My takeaway is the 24 budget process is going to be painful.
I'll be happy to see your faces on Saturday mornings.
So, our next goal with this process is to, in November, propose and debate solutions and start to develop an action plan. That's probably the most difficult part here. Just, thank you for coming up with all the statistics, the data. I think it's all important that we have that. But now it's going to be on all of us to start thinking of ideas. Come to the table with ideas. And I'd like to say no idea is too small, but certainly those heavy hitters are going to be the most appreciated.
Yep.
So that would be in our first November meeting?
I think we only have one.
We only have one? Is that true?
Traditionally, we only have one.
Did we make a change?
Traditionally, we only have one.
No, we have two.
Um,
December
nope,
has
you're right.
one.
Sorry, you're right. 15th and 22nd.
We do sometimes cancel around Thanksgiving if there's nothing going on.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
Not that I want to ruin everyone's Thanksgiving, but as much time as I could have to sort of come up with these solutions, I'd appreciate it. Just in terms of, I just want to make sure I have thorough information for you. So not that I'm asking that we discuss it on the 22nd, but any extra few days that you can provide me to get you all of that detail, I'd appreciate it.
at the moment, I don't think we'll be asking for any additional data unless somebody
Oh, okay.
has some.
I don't have any. Certainly, the items that we talked about today, I know I can certainly have some information on that. I guess my question should have been, what specifically would you want from me for that meeting over and above what I've already provided? Or is this more a brainstorming session between the administration and the committee? I just want to make sure I'm prepared and I don't drop any information, and I want to make sure we continue with the momentum.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate that, but I think at this point, unless someone has any other specific requests for information, I can't think of any myself.
Okay, then that's fine. That's fine.
We might even want to consider a little bit of not a retreat, but a Saturday meeting, if you will, instead of the 22nd. To start throwing around ideas, right? Get the whiteboard going and.
But you were talking about maybe bringing some of the solutions yourself. Is that what you're meant?
Yes.
Are you doing that? Well, certainly.
Yes.
Please plan to participate and
Okay.
bring your ideas as well.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I think that's why she wanted until the 22nd.
Okay.
And again, it whatever date you choose is fine. I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
Does it make sense, though, to have a
does.
session devoted to this, perhaps in a less restrictive and meeting format that we are discussing any number of things at?
Right. So we could think about that.
And we can talk about it at our next
Yeah,
meeting,
why don't we do that at the next meeting?
because we don't know yet if we'll have other business to attend to
Yep,
at the end of November. But something to think about. And I welcome the ideas from you, Amy, and everyone else.
Yes, and if you have ideas that.
And I'll hold myself accountable to come up with one or two.
Well, and also if you have any ideas for which you think you might need some financial information, please shoot it to me, and I'd be happy to prepare that for you. Or if it's not already readily available in what we've already discussed.
Very good. Thank you.
okay. Thanks, Amy. All right, so we're up to item 9, future dates, agenda topics. So we have a meeting on October 25th and one on November 15th. So any other items that people would like to discuss on either of those dates? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to move into executive session under Rhode Island General Law 42465A1, job performance, character, physical or mental health, superintendent, goals and evaluation, and Rhode Island General Law 42465A2, negotiation update, Council 94 and NEA.
I'll make that motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
That's for a vote. Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
Mrs. Spavo?
Yes.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
And I vote yes, so we're in executive session.